Welcome to our program on land back and climate justice in Marin with our special guests, Theresa and Jason. This is a program of the Climate Reality Project Bay Area Chapter Climate Justice Team, Indigenous Voices Speaker Series. We've had a climate justice team for almost 3 years, and we started the Indigenous Voices Project as a way for us to wrap our minds as a chapter around backing and thinking about Indigenous voices and Indigenous sovereignty in the context of climate and climate justice work.
Thank you for this opportunity to be part of the Indigenous Voices series. I just came back from an Indigenous conference with an emphasis on climate change. And a Maori sister, she was speaking and she said, "We're in a crisis of relationship, not a climate crisis." And that hit me as being so true, because if we were in relationship with our Mother Earth, our home, that was respectful, relational, reciprocal, generous, we would not be in the state that we are with global warming. This photograph that I'm sharing is our family's home from the 1940s. So archaeological records tell us that Coast Miwok people were on the peninsula for at least 12,000 years. So that's 12,000 years of Indigenous science. That's 12,000 years of observation and practice, and something that cannot be reduced to mythology. We know Spanish missions, Mexican ranchos, and American tenant ranching system and the commercial ranches that are there were all part of the colonial erasure of Coast Miwok or Tamalco people existence. They're the creators, they're the stakeholders of that erasure. We know that Tamalco people survived by their labor and their intimate knowledge of their land. But with colonization, they were reduced to tenants living in their own homelands. They were pushed to the margins, food sources and economies disrupted by cattle ranching. The missions brought in cattle, Mexican ranchos, American ranches continue cattle grazing on the peninsula, which devastated the natural grasses, the natural practice of tending to the land and the waters. And so our family at Felix Cove was just one of many Tamalco families that lived on the east and the west shores of Tamales Bay. But our home's the last remaining home built by Tamalco hands. So I was asked the question, what do American environmentalism, preservation, and conservation look like from my perspective? This is a photograph of President Kennedy signing the legislation that established Point Reyes National Seashore. These are the men who were part of that work to establish the park. So when I'm told by environmentalists that Indigenous science is not a science and more of a religious belief, this is what I see. When I'm told by white environmentalists that Native people had contributed to the extinction of certain animals or the destruction of certain landways, this is what I see.
My name is Jason Deschler. I'm the Coast Miwok, part of the Coast Miwok Tribal Council. I am preservation officer, cultural advisor. When I'm working with the community, I'm a keeper of traditions and stories that are passed down through our families. My family was in Marshall. We were there until the 60s, 1960s. We are Hukuiko. Huku meaning the first or up front. Ko or Iko coming from the word Iniko, family. Ko meaning people, Hukuiko. We are Tamalco. Tamalco is a branch of Hukuiko. We are from the village of Echakolom, which is right there across from the family that raised Theresa Harlan in of the Tamalco people of Tamal Liwa, of Tamal Huya, Point Reyes. 13,000 years, indigenous knowledge. We have a very strong relationship with the land, with fire. It's part of our creation story. You know, metaphorical stories and morals and values in these stories and lessons to be learned in building this relationship and living with the land in that way, understanding that if we didn't do this, that natural events were going to happen and be catastrophic. Some of you environmentalists and scientists know what biochar does for soil. When we collected the acorns for food and collected the leaves and the dead branches and burned around them, they thrived. Now, what happened, you know, Theresa spoke on that. You removed the people. The people were removed from the land. And then we were taught fire is bad. And I want to elaborate a little more on what I do personally for work. For one, we are homeless in our own land, so I do not get to live in Marin County. I live in Tuolumne County, where I work with 2 federally recognized tribes. And I do preservation work. I work in their cultural departments. I help do a lot of negotiations under AB 52 with the Forest Service, with CAL FIRE, with Caltrans, with PG&E. I was also involved with the Calaveras Band of Miwok, which is not a federally recognized tribe. Let me remind that there are no state recognized tribes in California. I think there might be not quite 70, high 60s throughout the entire United States, state recognized tribes, but not in California. Yet I work with a tribe who, you know, these entities recognize them and they understand who they are. And I do this preservation work with them. We did a cultural burn up Highway 4 in Big Trees State Park with the giant redwoods. All indigenous knowledge was shared, working with the Park Service themselves, also working with the entities that were thinning the trees, cutting the brush, us guiding them, showing them the cultural practices.
What could people here listening to you today do to support the land back and cultural preservation efforts that you're working on now and in the next period?
My thing is to have an open mind and to listen to the stories that we're sharing, listen to the information that we're sharing. And, you know, you can visit our websites and get more information. You can make donations to our websites. But one of the things that I'll say is that, you know, is really, I think, is understanding that what you may know about Point Reyes, the story behind it is not the full story. And so when you go to the park, remember that it's the home of our ancestors, and to visit there with respect. You live in Marin County, be respectful to our homelands.
Right now, we are looking at purchasing land, a 26-acre parcel in our homeland, buying our land back in Nicasio, Rancho Nicasio, which we once had 80,000 acres. It's kind of weird. One of our old headmen, he had to raise his own money to buy a 20-something acre parcel. Just happens to be right across the street from where we're looking at this land right now.